Okay, so welcome to this 12 and a half kick-ass sustainability ideas for 2024, which is our introductory session for Net Zero Business Academy. And before this year, it was known as Green Academy, but we decided to choose a name that was a bit more focused on what we actually do. Introduce myself, Gareth Kane. I walked past the building where I started my sustainability career 25 years ago this morning. I have written 5 books. I'm working on the 6th at the minute. A lot of the content comes from those books. I originally structured the sessions around the chapters of The Green Executive, my second book, although that has changed an awful lot over the years. My company, which I've been running for 16, 17 years, is called Terra Infirma. We have 4 main streams of activity. Our Net Zero Accelerator, which is for people who have a net zero strategy and want it to make it go faster. People who don't have a strategy, we work with them on that. Employee engagement and professional development, of which correct myself, Net Zero Business Academy, I will get used to it, is one of the major strands. And this is what it looks like after this taster. We have 10 much more focused sessions. So the taster is sort of the best of to give you a real flavor for the sort of things we cover. And, you know, to put it bluntly, we're not interested in ISO 14001. We're not interested in ISO 2400 or any other standard, incremental improvements, all that kind of thing. We're really trying to help you make step changes in your organization. So after that introduction, let's get on to this year's 12 and a half kick-ass sustainability ideas. But of course, first, the workbook. And this is quite a unique part of almost said it again, Net Zero Business Academy, is that for every session you get a workbook, and the idea is you complete this as we go forward, applying the ideas to your organization. We have a couple of consultants with us. I'm aware of that. It may not be directly applicable to your company if you're like me, a sole trader, but I would recommend you pick a client, somebody you know well, and then see how you would apply the ideas to them as an example. That's the most practical way of going about that. So normally in the sessions, there's lots of different exercises. For this one, it's quite simple. So if I pause, I'm clicking to let somebody in from the waiting room into the session. So for each of the ideas, there's a bit of a spoiler if you look forward. There's a box to write down how you would apply that in your organization. And then 2 other boxes, one for opportunity, one for risk. And this is very typical of how we assess things in Net Zero Business Academy. We don't go into lots and lots of detail. It's what do you think the opportunity is from this idea, high, medium, or low? And what would be the risk? And you can, again, you can define risk as what you want, whether it's reputational risk, whether it's the cost of implementing it, whatever it might be. And you can judge for yourselves what high, medium, and low is, because at the end of the day, that's the assessment that you're going to have to make. It's going to be a personal one. Okay, so we won't be pausing in this session because we've got a lot to get through. So keep filling that in as you go along. If you haven't printed it off or whatever, or don't have an electronic version that you could scribble on top of with an electronic pencil, if you've got a scrap of paper and a pen, it's pretty easy to, to do the same manually, old school style. Right, so back to the 12 and a half kick-ass sustainability ideas. Oh, I should add for the people who joined us later, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat box if you find that and open it. I will pick them up at some point, whether I stop as soon as they come in, if that's appropriate, or if they're lagging behind the ideas, I may pick them up at the end, but I will cover them, and you are perfectly entitled to yell at me if I don't. So the first one is one of my underpinning concepts for success and sustainability and corporate sustainability. And that's, you have to find the overlap between the net zero stroke sustainability agenda and your business interests. And I feel this is very important, whether you're talking in the boardroom or whether you're developing a strategy, is that you're always very cognizant of trying to find that area where sustainability or net zero are doing good for your business. Why? Because people will listen to you and your strategy will be benefiting the business rather than being seen as a drag on it. Now, I think it was about 10 years ago, there was a Canadian academic who produced a paper saying corporate social responsibility isn't genuine unless it cuts your profits. And loads of people went, oh, yes, this is great. I just thought that was ridiculous. You know, you're asking people to put their business success at risk for sustainability. Whether or not you believe they should, you're onto a loser, because frankly, they're not going to do it. So what do I mean by business interests? Well, the very first session of Green Academy proper, sorry, Net Zero Business Academy, I will get used to that, is to investigate the business case for sustainability as it applies to your business. Now, a lot of people say, oh, I know the business case. Yes, there's lots of good business reasons to take sustainability seriously, but you have to understand what it means to your business. And this is the business case model we use. I'm not going to go into it here because we've got a whole hour on this next time. But if your business case, for example, is winning new business in the marketplace, and as one of my major clients had, all their sustainability projects, like any other project, had to have a payback within 2 years, a financial payback within 2 years, then they were struggling to get sustainability projects which would win them new business by addressing their customers' concerns through their investment appraisal position. So the two were working against each other. Likewise, if you take a very compliance-based approach, but the biggest benefit for you embracing sustainability is attracting the best and retaining the best talent, a compliance-based approach isn't going to cut the mustard. So it's all about working out where the different drivers are and making sure that everything you do is cognizant and based on those drivers. So as I say, we will go into that in a lot more detail in the first session of Green Academy. The second one is also a mindset, which is about a can-do attitude. I like this, the glass green glass half full rather than half empty. I think we have a tendency within sustainability to fall into doomism and trying to persuade people to act because of this impending catastrophe. And we've been doing this since, was it 1962 that Silent Spring by Rachel Carson was published? And yet we're moving very, very slowly. Doomism doesn't seem to work. And it creates this rather strange gap between the scale of the problem and what you're asking people to do. You know, we're all going to die in a fireball unless you switch off the lights at night or, turn down the air conditioning, whatever it might be. So you have to be careful that the behavioral change you want from people in the organization or other stakeholders might be quite minor. So you can't go, full on eco doom on them. I think people get paralyzed by doom. And I saw a statistic recently that up to 30% of people suffer from some form of eco-anxiety. And if you have people saying, what's the point? We're all going to die, they're not going to do anything. So I suggest instead that you have this is a really big challenge, but we can do our bit. We are confident that if we all pull together and make change happen, you have to emphasize that it's not kumbaya, sit around the campfire. There's actual job to be done. If we all act, we can fix this. And I heard from somebody who there is apparently some statistics that carbon emissions might be closer to peaking than we first thought. So that can-do attitude, I think we need to actually make change happen. Number 3, which is kind of related, is make sustainability easy. And again, I criticize some elements of the green stroke sustainability movement, which seem to treat sustainability as some sort of dark priesthood with initiation rites and, bizarre jargon, all the rest of it. And they're literally trying to raise the barrier to participation. That is ridiculous. If you want people to recycle, you have to make recycling easy. And one of my favorite examples, because it's from real life, was this goes back quite a few years, pre-COVID, pre-Zoom, and all the rest of it, when teleconferencing was the exception rather than the rule. I was working with a very large company with sites all around the UK and some abroad as well, but mainly in the UK. And they had a teleconferencing system that was gathering dust. And during an employee workshop, and I will come on to workshops in a minute, we asked the question, why does nobody use teleconferencing? And somebody got up and ranted and raved about it. And so he was so angry about the whole system. And when we got him to calm down, explain what he meant, he explained that in order to find out how much the teleconferencing system was saving the company, if you wanted to book it, you had to estimate the cost of the meeting you weren't having. Whereas it was much easier to send out an invite to all the participants and get them to come to your site and do all the traveling, because otherwise you would have to work out where they were traveling from and how much hotel costs and all the rest of it. It was a massive amount of unnecessary green tape. So they, as a result of that workshop, they stripped that away. And the next thing they had to do with the teleconferencing system was double its capacity because it was so popular. So you really do have to make it easy for people to do the right thing, the thing you want them to do. Do not expect them to go out of the way. Make it easy. If you want people to cycle, you should have secure cycle facilities, not at the far end of the car park, but up near the entrance, showers, lockers, whatever else they need. You have to provide the facilities for people to do this, because if you want more than a committed minority to do it, you have to make it as easy as possible. Now, the flip side, which we'll talk about in session 3 of Green Academy on engagement, is some companies add a little bit of grit, a little bit of resistance to the behavior you don't want, which is the flip side of this one. I have one client where if you want to book a flight of any sort, it has to be signed off by the finance director. Any other travel mode, you can get it signed off by your line manager. And that's not saying nobody flies, but it's saying if you're going to fly, you have to come and justify it to the boss, the person with their hand on the the wallet in their pocket. And that kind of shifting of the playing field away from brown behavior, might say, and towards green behavior is absolutely essential. And it's really good for quick wins. Really, really good for quick wins. If you want to see things happen quickly, just identify the barriers and take them away. Okay, no questions as yet. If you have any, stick them in the chat and I will pick them up. Okay, how to sell sustainability to just about anybody. This is one of my favorite tricks. I'm not sure if any of you have been in one of my workshops. I'll explain why I do workshops in a minute. But unless I've spoken to the group before, I open my workshops exactly the same way every time. I get a blank sheet of flip chart paper, or there's ways of doing it online as well if we're having an online meeting, but in a meeting room, blank sheet. I write at the top, why are we here? And explain. I'm not talking about some sort of existential philosophy. I'm saying, why does your business need to take sustainability seriously? Then I shut up and I wait. And there is always a massive awkward pause. And I wait and I wait and I wait. And I wait until somebody says one of the things that was on my business case model before, whether it's cut costs, whether it's legislation, whether it's customer demand, whatever it might be. I write that up and say, anything else? And then we keep doing this until the sheet is full and I've got all the major drivers that I expect. Now, I could put up a slide with my business case on it and talk through it, as I will next session. But this is a very powerful way of getting people to sell sustainability to themselves. Because simple psychology says they will believe themselves and anything they work out or that their peers work out far more than me as the bearded sustainability guy who's come in and is lecturing them about how they're killing the planet. So that's how I start every workshop. I'm giving away one of my trade secrets here. You flip it round, don't tell them, ask them why they should take it seriously. It works a treat, an absolute treat. But you've got to have the nerve, I was going to say something ruder, you've got to have the nerve to keep that pause going until it really hurts and they start speaking. Okay, that's number 4. Number 5, and this is all about workshops. This is a quote which is usually attributed to Benjamin Franklin, but like all these quotes, when you actually stick them into Quote Investigator, and I'm a bit sad I do that, the website, they say, probably, but we're not entirely sure. But it's tell me and I forget, teach me and I remember, and involve me and I learn. And this is why almost everything I do involves workshops. And I've already mentioned it a couple of times, because when people get stuck in and start putting their ideas down, 2 main things happen. Well, sorry, 3. I'll say 3. First of all, they get a deeper understanding of what you're talking about, that it just doesn't bounce off, all this eco jargon coming at them because they're actually being given a job to do. Secondly, you get a much better understanding of what's going on in the organization, really, because sorry, just one last person coming in. You're getting their knowledge down on paper rather than you trying to glean it as you walk around a factory or office, whatever else it might be. You're actually getting people who know what they're talking about, their business, getting involved in that. And thirdly, again, that psychology that I was talking about on selling it is if somebody has an idea themselves, they are about 100 times more likely to implement it than if I recommend that they take a particular action. And this, again, just skews the playing field. Suddenly, instead of pushing water uphill, trying to keep this polite language-wise, the water flows downhill. It's really very, very powerful. And I sometimes joke that no matter what I am doing as a piece of consultancy, it always involves workshops. It always involves workshops for this very good reason. So run workshops, learn to facilitate, but get the people who have to implement the decisions involved. And that's very important. So if I am doing a sustainability strategy, one of the things I insist on is that we get the boardroom in, or I get into the boardroom more often than not. Sometimes I'm only getting a little bit in terms of in a much larger board meeting, but I will go in and I will do my thing of selling sustainability on the drivers. Then we'll set out and pin down some targets. And then I will do a strategy development exercise, which I will come to in Kick-Ass idea number 11, because it's really, really powerful. And the reason why I want the boardroom in there is I've learned through bitter experience that it is far more important to have buy-in for your strategy than it is to have a good strategy. You can have a bit of a half-hearted one, but if you've got buy-in, it will happen. You could have a perfect one, no buy-in, nothing happens. So this sort of engagement thing that I do, I call green jiu-jitsu. Some of you may have heard me say this. And the idea is that most environmental of the environmental movement, most environmental campaigning is like boxing. You're trying to beat the other person into submission. You're trying to tell them why they really must act. And here's, the risk from runaway climate change. Here's the, 2023 is by far the warmest year on record, all the rest of it. But I think as I said before, we have come up against the backstop on that. It only appeals to a certain percentage of the population. So if we want change to happen, by definition, we have to appeal to the other people. A jiu-jitsu expert, and my martial arts career was stopped after a year with a seriously damaged knee. And I never did jiu-jitsu, but they say a jiu-jitsu expert works to their opponent's strengths. So if you're tall, they will use techniques that work for tall people. And if you come at them fast, they will use your momentum against you to flip you over. But it's this whole idea of working to strengths rather than trying to fix people's weaknesses. That's the basis of green jiu-jitsu. And a bit like the first one, another Venn diagram. I love a Venn diagram. Is you have to find a sweet spot between the interests of your audience and sustainability. And the reason why this works is we are bombarded with pieces of information continuously, absolutely bombarded, whether it's formal message like advertising. And some people say we see hundreds of pieces of advertising. Some people say thousands, although that's probably exaggerated. We see hundreds of advertising messages every day. We get a gazillion emails. We get this, we get that. But even just all the stimulus crossing the road, cars coming, processing information all the time. We would go mad if our minds didn't filter out all the information that we think is extraneous to what we need. And so if people haven't got sustainability yet, you have to assume that most of sustainability and the mainstream sustainability message is outside their attention. And I don't mean got in a superficial way, I mean really understand it. So what you have to find, and there's always an overlap, is where their interests and sustainability overlap. If I was going to take a sporting analogy for this, I am really not keen on golf. I don't know whether we've got any golfers here, so I won't offend anybody, but I really don't like golf. And I'll leave it at that because I don't want anybody storming off. Except, as you probably hear from my accent, I'm from Northern Ireland. If Rory McIlroy's in the news, excellent golfer from Northern Ireland, I will pay attention. Because my parochial little brain goes, oh, fellow Northern Irishman doing well, I'm going to read about it, even though he's doing something I can't stand. So the only golfer I follow, it's completely illogical, is Rory McIlroy. So even for me in golf, a sport I hate, there is an overlap. In the same way, you have to find that overlap between sustainability and your audience. And sorry, I thought I had an example in there. I first came up with this with an engineering company that I was doing employee engagement with. And they first asked me to come in and talk to their engineers about switching their TVs off properly at night and recycling more. And I said to them, no way, because I'm an engineer and there's no way I'm standing up in front of much more experienced engineers than me and telling them how to switch their televisions off at night. That's absolutely ridiculous. So I pitched this idea at the client, because I've been doing some work and I'd started this involvement thing. This is the genesis of it. It was about 13 years ago. And I said, how about we present sustainability as an engineering problem and get them to solve the problems? And it just went ballistic when we tried it. We had a pilot first. She wasn't 100% convinced. So she said, let's do a pilot, see what it's like. Halfway through the pilot, and she said, okay, we're doing this. There's so much energy in the room. Everybody loves it. And when I thought about it afterwards, I realized that engineers get out of bed in the morning to solve problems. So we were challenging them to solve problems. I've done quite a lot of work with the health service. If everything we do, we link it to patient care. So whether it's the health risk of climate change or air quality problems, or whether it's the health benefits of active travel and some of the other solutions, we always try and tie health into it as much as possible, because even though there are huge numbers of people who are very keen on sustainability within the health service, you get everybody's attention when it's connected to healthcare, because obviously these people get out of bed in the morning to make people healthier or keep them healthy. I could talk about health service sustainability for a long time. It's got some very fascinating corners. But now, if you're a big organization, I gave you a slight preview of this before, you might want to segment your audience. So I've just taken some examples here of different magazines. Now, if you were trying to appeal to the readers of all those different magazines with a single message, you're going to fail. And I remember doing a piece of work for one of the research councils here in the UK with quite a big scientific staff. And the thing we uncovered was that the estate staff there, who went round and would switch things off or report a problem, all those, they just wanted a nice, simple set of instructions. Here's the procedure. Here's what you should do under different circumstances. This is what you should switch off. Leave these on. They just wanted it nice and simple. Dum, dum, dum. Do. The scientists, on the other hand, that wouldn't work with them. And the energy manager, she had to provide the scientists not just with the conclusions of what they'd found, what they were doing in energy reduction, but she always had to attach all the raw data on it, because the scientists would literally do regression analysis on it to make sure her conclusion was statistically correct. And so that's two completely different audiences. So do not be afraid to have different segments for different audiences, sometimes down to a single person. And again, another one of my clients got me in to just do a little bit of coaching, because the new chief executive coming in was previously a finance director of another company. And he wanted me to just go through his presentation and, as an outsider, see what I thought. And I said, That's all well and good, but where are the numbers? And he looked at me and I said, you're trying to appeal to somebody who spent most of their professional career staring at spreadsheets. Get some numbers in there, and particularly financial numbers. And I knew they had plenty of good things to say on that. So he rebuilt the presentation with much more, it became much more quantitative rather than qualitative, and particularly having financial information in there because that's what the audience is used to. So again, if you think back to the Venn diagram, if somebody's interests are all about finance, then to get that overlap, that sweet spot, you have to look at the finances of sustainability when you're talking to them. Okay, still not getting any questions through. I know this is quite fast paced. This one we do pause a lot more on the other sessions because well we've got more relaxed one topic for a full hour. In this we're going through an awful lot very very quickly, so I do tend to wrap it on. And I'm actually talking more than I intended and giving you more ideas on each of these and case studies than I thought I was going to. Number 7, build a sustainable supply chain. You guys thinking about who's on the call, probably all fully aware that for most organizations, the bulk of their carbon footprint or their ecological footprint, however you want to measure it, is in the supply chain. Because extracting and processing materials or creating electricity out of whether it's sunbeams or anything else, that's a very difficult and dirty process, you know, compared to say putting together iPads at the very end of the day. It tends to be well down the supply chain where the dirty stuff happens. Plus, any new technology is dependent and often restrained by immature supply chains. So you're not going to be able to transform your supply chain by sending out supplier questionnaires or doing audits or any of that bog standard stuff that everybody has to do. And it's important you do it, but it's not going to change anything massively. It's just really making sure that nothing's going badly wrong. So this headline, Nissan funnels £1 billion into Sunderland Gigafactory to produce, well, the Gigafactories to produce the batteries for the new electric vehicle models. And so I'm not just restricted to one company. JLR, Jaguar Land Rover, have done the same in Somerset. They have invested in a gigafactory in a partnership with a supplier of batteries to produce the batteries they need to have a major transformation in the cars they produce. So that kind of transformation doesn't happen, as I say, with, you know, ISO 2400 and all that stuff. This is big strategic business thinking. And again, going back a few years, there was a buzz around a phrase called creating share value, which was about investing either in markets or investing in supply chains to make them better, whether it's environmentally or socially. And this is it writ large, is instead of saying, throwing your hands up in the air and saying, we can't get any electric vehicle batteries, it's no, we're going to do a partnership. We're going to literally build a factory, and a big factory, to produce them, because that's the only way we can make change happen at that kind of pace. So, as I say, think big on the supply chain. And if you have the resources to invest, you can invest. Little tip is for organizations which don't have the resources necessarily, you can band together, even with competitors, and invest in a particular pinch point in the supply chain. I know the building trade, which does have quite a bit of cash, but they work together to upskill technicians who would be in their subcontractors to install heat pumps or solar panels, things like that, because they know that working together, they can make that change happen much more quickly than they do apart. So that's a little bit of a tip as well, a bit of collaboration. Wasn't one of the original 12 and a half ideas. Also in the supply chain, closing loops. And the circular economy is a big buzz phrase. I grind my teeth because a lot of people who use it are basically talking about recycling more. But it's much, much more than that. The reason why I've got a fishing net in this picture is because more and more companies are starting to take an interest in what's known as ocean-bound plastics. So taking plastics like fishing gear, about a third of all ocean plastic is discarded fishing gear. So working with fishers often in developing countries to capture that old fishing gear and recycle it back into a product is taking huge amounts of plastic out of the oceans. One of my clients, Interface, who turn up quite a bit in Net Zero Business Academy because they are so good at what they do, they were pioneers with this. They partnered again with a company called Aquanile, who were producing this, and they can sell you carpet tiles, so the world's largest carpet tiles manufacturer, I should have said for those of you who don't know Interface, made out of old fishing nets. But also Samsung do ocean-bound plastics in their phones. Alpakit, which is a UK-based outdoor clothing company, my partner bought a swimsuit made out of old fishing nets. So you can close a lot of loops. Even road sweepings can be seen as resource because of catalytic converters in cars. The concentration of platinum, which is the basis of the catalyst in your car catalytic converter, the concentration of platinum in road sweepings is actually higher than it is in its virgin ore. So some companies are now making money out of taking road sweepings and processing them to take out particularly platinum, but sometimes other materials. There are even companies who are making money out of taking gold out of human sewage. I won't go into that in any more detail, but it goes to show that almost any loop can be closed if you try hard enough. Now, the key to the circular economy is not to think about recycling and waste and seeing waste as a problem. It's about thinking about raw materials. If you think about raw materials, you will start to pull quality materials through that loop. And it'll be in the interest of everybody else in the loop to keep the quality up because it keeps the value in the product. So I mentioned Interface and their sort of premium carpet tiles, which are made out of fishing nets, but they also, through quite a lot of work, realized that the only sustainable raw material for new carpet tiles was old carpet. So they have set up a whole process of recovering and recycling old carpet back into their new product. And the way they maintain the quality is they take the carpet, if they get a big order from, say, a university to recarpet huge amounts of the university, they will, for a small fee, take away the old carpet, and then that gets processed back into the next generation. Because obviously, if you took it to a civic amenity site, you don't know what's on it, and it becomes a lot more messy. But I actually saw the carpet recycling factory, the pilot line, when they were just going live on this in the Netherlands. It was a lot more brutal carpet recycling than I expected to be. It was like some dystopian thriller, sort of steampunk type thing, but they are really doing it. But it's all about the quality of the raw materials in the circular economy. So think about sustainable raw materials rather than recycling per se. Okay. Oh, we're getting on well now. Number 9. And this is one that I must admit has come to me quite recently, uh, from from industry, that I've realized this is what was happening in industry. There were two sort of almost competing types of target. One is the simple, we're going to be net zero by 2030, 2040, 2050. And that means reducing carbon as low as possible and then offsetting the rest. And we're going to, because we've refocused net zero, we're going to have a whole session on offsetting. I'm not going to go into it today. Or science-based targets, where the Science-Based Target Initiative would work out the trajectory you had to follow as in your industry in order to um, contribute to keeping global warming below 1.5 degrees centigrade or 2 degrees, whichever you chose. Now, the problem I always had with science-based targets is they'd say something like, by 2030, you need to cut your carbon footprint by 37.5%. And that's quite a hard target to sell, unless you're all scientists and very numerate and all the rest of it. 37.5% seems like it's not a number that you want to die in a ditch in. Whereas net zero, that zero is a very powerful mental target because it means we're going to change massively. But net zero started being attacked because a lot of companies weren't saying how much they were going to reduce their carbon footprint before they release the offset. So people are saying, well, it's just like carbon neutral in the early 2000s. You could just buy a load of offsets and keep on polluting. So what I found that a lot of businesses are now doing is doing both. So they have their big public net zero target. It sounds great and it aligns with the 90% of the world's economies now come under some form of net zero target, so it's all aligned with that. But they have the science-based targets underneath to back that up. So if anybody is interested and says, oh, what do you mean by net zero? You're just greenwashing. You go, no, look here. Here's the carbon descent trajectory. There's the targets we are going to hit in between. And so it's not, we really mean it. It's not just jumping on a bandwagon and greenwashing a bit. So this is obviously for big businesses, but net zero and science-based targets, a very powerful combination. I'm going to have a sip of water. Still not getting any questions through. I will take them on as we go along. And, I'm happy to stay after 3 o'clock. I'm keeping an eye on the time here. I always like to start in time, always like to finish in time. But I do quite happy to hang on if people have a bit more time and have some questions to answer at the end. But keep them firing through as you think of them. Now, number 10 is related to targets as well, and that's about stretching yourself. Because people who set year-on-year targets, and what I mean by that is a target where you say, we will cut our footprint by 2% every year, you soon start running out of 2% to cut. And you spend more and more time trying to squeeze some efficiency out of the same system, but there's no incentive really or no time to change the system because you're trying to get those 2% to stay on trajectory. So you might think you're going to follow the blue line, but you end up following the red. Whereas stretch targets do two things, and this is where net zero comes in quite well, to be honest, is it makes people think about big changes and what they really have to do to get to this target. But it also, if you're an asset intensive business, as some of you are on this. So we've got lots of buildings, lots of plant, factories, whatever else, vehicles, fleet, whatever else it might be. It actually gives you time to make the change. Because, you know, if you want to electrify your fleet, that isn't going to happen overnight. There's all sorts of things you're going to have to work into it, and the investment appraisals and planning and all the rest of it. You need to give yourself time to make those big changes. So it is a mental, and you probably get a theme coming through here. A lot of it's about the mindset and the psychological readiness to make big changes. But it also gives you that time. We'll go into the timing of targets as well, because that's quite important in session 2 in Green Academy, where we look at strategy. That's where we'll pick up targets in detail. Now, I think I forgot to slot in a slide here of my favorite example, because it involves whiskey. But Diageo, the drinks giant, they had incremental targets and they ran out of 2%. They then changed to stretch targets. And the next thing they knew, they had planned 2 enormous anaerobic digesters to take the waste product from the whiskey distilling process and process it into clean energy, which also treated that waste and made it cheaper to dispose of. And at the time, this is going back 15 years, they were planning these. At the time, they were the 2 biggest renewable energy projects outside the energy sector. And their sustainability manager told me, for the Green Executive book, which is up behind me, that change was because they went from incremental targets to stretch targets. Now, the thing you have to be careful of is a lot of people who have stretch targets will then translate them into incremental targets. So you might say you want to cut your carbon footprint in half by 2030. They will calculate how many years it is and how many percentage you need to go down each time. That isn't helpful, because it gets you into that incremental mindset, whereas you need to be thinking about those big step changes. Mindset, mindset, mindset. It's a big theme in Net Zero Business Academy. Okay. So create the future you want. This is where a lot of the ideas in here come together. And, you know, I've got a picture which is a little bit kumbaya, arms around the tree of something staring at the sunset. But there are ways and means of doing this. A lot of people's sustainability strategies aren't really strategies. They might have a target, and then they'll have a load of actions of things they think they might want to do. And they kind of hope that it all adds up. Or they'll think of new things in 3 or 4 years' time to do, and then they'll do those, and then they'll do more, and then they'll do more. And again, it's all this incremental thinking. And this is known as forecasting, where the top line in that graph is business as usual. And if you had a growing business, it would take an upward trajectory. You want to get that line down into the green box there marked sustainability. So you might think, oh, well, policy 1, that'll get us a bit closer. Policy 2 will get us a bit closer. You're trying to bend the trend, but you never know whether all those policies add up to what you need to do. So this is all sort of incremental thinking again. You're everything that's a little bit better. And I'm not knocking being a little bit better. It's better than not being a little bit better. But if you're serious about sustainability, serious about net zero, you have to make these big, substantial changes. So there's an alternative called backcasting. And I love backcasting. Somewhere in the bookcase behind me is a book from a Swedish organization called The Natural Step. And that's where I first learned about this. But not many people use it. And I don't understand why, because it is brilliant. So you forget about business as usual, forget about all that. And you start at the end. I'm risking here. Oh, no, I went the wrong way. I was going to try and draw on this, but can I draw on that? No, it's not. Sorry. Oh, losing control of PowerPoint. So I was going to try drawing it. The drawing thing wouldn't work for some reason. So you start at the end, that star that says endpoint, and you define what your organization would look like if you met your sustainability targets. My favorite is to get people to, if we're doing it face to face, it's harder to do this online. It's possible to do it online, but you have to do it more with words than pictures. I like doing it with pictures if I have people face to face. So you literally get them to draw the organization, how it would function under your net zero or whatever sustainability targets those might be. So then you've got a vision of the future that works. Then you step back halfway from then and today. And I always ask the question, what would you have to have started doing? And importantly, what would you have to have stopped doing by then to be on the trajectory to hit the end point? And that's often the really, really powerful one. And then you go back to today and say, what do you have to start doing now to hit that intermediate stage? Now, if you haven't tried this in practice, you might be thinking, what difference does this make? Surely you can just do it forwards, backwards. It doesn't really make it. It makes a huge difference. You can also align the steps to your intermediate stretch targets. Something I mentioned, the timing. You do not want your only target to be 2050, because even from today, 27 years in the future, a lot of people who are in serious decision-making posts will think that they're going to be playing golf all day, talk about golf again. I seem to be obsessed about it today. But they'll be retired, long gone. It won't be their problem. So you need a target somewhere that focuses their mind. So you can align backcasting to those intermediate targets, and then you get this plan for the first stage of the trajectory to get to your endpoint. And if you have a big team working on this, you can split into groups. You can get different people to do different endpoints, either you telling them to try different scenarios that might get you to net zero, or sometimes I just let them, I just let them come up with their own. And then you can compare and contrast their intermediate stage and their immediate actions and blend them together. I'm giving away how I write strategies now. Blend them together to give you a proper sustainability strategy. So backcasting is incredibly powerful. You don't even have to do it just for the strategy. When I'm getting people to implement strategies, we will devolve this down to departmental level, team levels, and I will use the same backcasting process. Right. I've waffled too long that. I realize 3 o'clock is coming up quite fast. So the last one is wield the axe. And I did mention on the last one, what you stop doing is as important as what you start doing. Because if we're going to create a sustainable economy, we've got a largely brown economy at the minute with a much smaller green economy. We not only need that green growth, we need to destroy the brown economy, both because it's damaging and because if it still exists, we won't get the green growth because they'll be competing for the same space. So it is creative destruction. So if that's global or national level way of thinking about it, when you get to a company level, here my friends at Interface, they have deliberately deleted products, profitable products, in their case, mainly because they had brominated flame retardants, which was against their sustainability goal, which they call Mission Zero. So they have deliberately stopped doing those. And what Nigel told me is that by declaring they weren't going to make those products anymore, that created a space in their portfolio. So that meant they had to be creative and design new products which were compliant with Mission Zero. So wielding the axe is often the most difficult thing to do, but it is the most important. Okay, so there are your 12 ideas. If you've been doing the high, medium, low thing as we've been going through, then very quickly, he's running out of time. If you write the number of each of the 12 ideas into that grid, just watch the bottom one because it goes high, medium, low in that direction rather than low, medium, high. The opportunity, low, medium, high up on the vertical, then the best ideas for you will gravitate towards the top right. Having said I want to bring this in time, I just got too look. I went off too many tangents in those last few sessions because obviously when we go into them in detail on the thing, there is a lot more in each topic, and I'm just trying to give you a flavor, but I couldn't help myself do that. But whether or not you've finished that, because we're up on 3 o'clock, and I know people may want to rush off to other things. This is the exercise we complete at the end of every Green Academy session. It's the most important one, and it's a kind of backcasting. So what I want you to do is I want you to think about the 3 most important things you've learned today, which probably be the ones in the top right of that column. I want you to think forward 6 months to a year and say, what would you do differently as a result of those 3 things? And then jump back to today. What 3 actions would you take first to get the ball rolling on those 3 things? So really, really simple actions, those last ones. It may be call a meeting with Joanne in design department or Frank in the engineering department or whoever it might be. What are those, or send an email or look up legislation or whatever it might be. The really, really immediate actions to start those balls rolling, because big, massive goals are often made up of lots of basic actions. Still happy to take questions. As I say, I'm going to stay on. I appreciate people might want to go. We've finished the 12, but I've got a little bit more to say just about Net Zero Business Academy at the end. But this is where I feel when I've seen, I never ask you, by the way, to tell me what you've put in these things, but people I know who have participated, who have shown me what they've put in, this is definitely the most powerful bit of each webinar, is turning these big, sometimes slightly hazy concepts down into concrete action. And mini backcasting. Right. Some of you might be thinking, what was the half? 12 and a half kick-ass ideas. The reason why I put it as a half is because the 12 are me providing you with ideas that you can take away. The half is semi-salesmanship or very salesmanship. All of us need to sharpen our saws. All of us need to work out how to do things better. It's one of the things I love about sustainability is you're constantly learning all the time. In terms of Terra Firma, here's 3 ways we can help you do your job better. There's Net Zero Business Academy. Some people on the call have already subscribed. Some people have VIP passes for, but this is the cheapest way we have of interacting with lots of people to spread the sustainability word. In the middle of this, because it gets more expensive as you turn right, is our mastermind group, which we used to meet face to face, as you can see in the picture, which is peer-to-peer learning. So people from large organizations discussing a topic, and if you peer very closely, you will see that there's the sheet of paper on the floor has got like a mind map on it, and that structures a discussion, and we go in depth on a sustainability topic, but we're learning from each other. There are no experts. There's no PowerPoint. And we use the Chatham House rule so that you can report what was said, but you can't say who said it. Strictly speaking, you're not meant to say who's in the room when it was said. So we get that little bit of confidentiality. So we get a much more honest conversation than we do in a commercial event. And then lastly, one-to-one coaching, where we will help you address all your issues. If you're interested in coaching, some people like coaching, some people don't, let me know. We can set up a free trial session and run through and see if it works for you. So again, there's the Net Zero Business Academy syllabus. It's usually the first Wednesday of every month. It does change because of school holidays here in the UK and a couple of other commitments, but it's usually about then. You will get a recording afterwards, as you will get a recording of this session, so you can recap after the event, either if you miss one or if there's something that you want to go back and listen to again. And you know, there's always a certain pace we have to keep up with on this. And lastly, if you'd like to subscribe to the whole, if you haven't already subscribed to Net Zero Business Academy, and as I say, a couple of people on the call have already, then I will send out a little special offer that you can get a reduction there. But I will flip back up to the 12 kick-ass sustainability ideas. And as I say, if you've got any questions, I am happy to take them. I will read them out, so just don't put any trade secrets in there. Not that anybody would, but just so that you're aware that I will read out whatever you write down if you have any questions. Right. Thank you all for your kind words on the chat. I'm not getting any questions through, so for the recording, I will say thank you very much for attending. And I do hope those of you who haven't signed up already for Net Zero Business Academy will do, because it's a lot of fun. The more, the merrier. So until next time, goodbye.